I don't think you've yet answered Nate's question about how changes in the environment and threats of catastrophic climate change affect conditions of organizing, which I took to be the question.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I may have just jumped past that.
Well, I was interested.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer the question, but I just want to put a flag on that. But let's go back to the California example, and then the stuff that you and I are trying to do with minority unionism. Why would you diversify beyond LA and a few other sites in California to get a multitude of sites, given the new federalism and the hatred of states by cities, just to get more power?
Yeah, we couldn't move enough in the legislature.
Yeah, okay.
On the thinness of a base just in.
Was basically to get representation in the legislature. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. So,
well, and to move statewide issues. I mean, you know, one of the undone jobs in California, I mean, after we won minimum wage with a coalition in San Francisco, which is still very robust, I mean, I would have thought that would have led to a domino effect in cities throughout the state, because they would be leapfrogging what the living wage level was in each city, higher than the state minimum wage, which is not, you know, not insignificant, certainly higher than the federal. And that hadn't happened. Once again, it's a resource. I mean, it's not easy to put a ballot measure on in Los Angeles or San Diego or whatever, but those are essentially engineering problems. I mean, how many people, how much money, what do you need to do this, what's the strength of the organization? And people couldn't handle sort of engineering problems at that level, and I think that's a capacity question. So not meaning to avoid the environmental thing, I just think that right now that's still not an issue except for certain specific areas, Philippines, Indonesia. We're trying to communicate with people in Japan about what their experience was, similar to our own in New Orleans. I'm trying to get them to write it up for the next issue of Social Policy, in fact, sort of a year later. And I think community organizations are vital in this, and a lot of the experiences are very common in what we saw, but it's still all reactive. None of it is proactive. And to the degree environmentalists are still carrying the sharp, you know, stick here and waving the flag, it doesn't have a mass base behind it anywhere. And that's disturbing. You know, in Indonesia, after the tsunami, and that, you know, it was fascinating to me that they faced some of the exact same problems we saw in New Orleans. And, you know, I can now I'm sort of a minor expert in disaster organizing. I even have a special chapter about lessons of disaster in the Battle of the Ninth Ward book. But this whole rebuilding, you know, argument is often a depopulation argument. And one of the most interesting things that our partner in Indonesia was doing is they represented in Aceh a lot of the fishermen. Well, the whole aid community, the donor community, argued, we'll support you, but you have to push your housing back, you know, a couple of kilometers away from the beach. Well, no one wanted to do that. I mean, they'd lost, you know, all their businesses, all their homes, in some cases all their families, but these were fishermen, and that's what they'd done, that's what they knew how to do. They all still were trying to camp, rebuild right there on the shore. So what is an organization that's trying to help rebuild in Aceh going to do? That's a community organization. You end up fighting to win the right to build close to the shore. And the environmental community is always robust. It was in New Orleans arguing that we're in fact risking people's lives, that we're just leading people to death, and there's global climate, you know. But they're also, until you're able to connect income and environment, livelihood and, you know, environmental safety, you don't have residents here. I mean, in New Orleans, when all the environmentalists were arguing against our rebuilding plan, and we obviously worked with these people in some cases for decades as allies in other issues, but in the rebuilding issue, I mean, it really is. Unless somebody's actually going to fund you to move to higher ground, and higher ground in New Orleans that didn't flood multiplied, you know, wildly in value. I lived on high ground, and now you know, all of a sudden from having a modest little house, my house was worth 3 or 4 times that, and the property taxes went, you know, up 3 or 4 times, just because I'd been around New Orleans long enough to know to live on high ground. So I was, you know, just that smart. not that smart, but just that smart. But that was an opportunity I had, and at that time, that's what I did. But if I was, you know, a lower income family, and my family had built in the lower Ninth Ward, which was not low ground. I don't care what people have read or seen or heard about the lower Ninth Ward. Its average, you know, was above sea level by a half to a foot. Some areas higher, some areas lower. But, you know, that was not the lowest part of the city by any means, and the percentage of home ownership was higher than almost any other area. So it was old longshoremen and whatever. Many people had their grandfathers and grandmothers that built those houses with their hands. That was home. That is you know, that's a community where, you know, your cousins and your friend, everybody, you know, might be a block around there. I mean, an organizer like Tanya Harris, who worked for New Orleans ACORN, literally could make a list around where she was from in the lower Ninth Ward of 100 people. God, I couldn't do that. I mean, that's way past any Facebook damn thing. I mean, you're talking about, you know, who knows who, and who, you know, and you could, when you were starting to look for people to rebuild the lower Ninth Ward, that's how we made those lists. Go back to the members, see who knew who was related to who'd been, where'd you go to school, where'd you get the groceries, where'd you do this, and that's how you rebuild the neighborhood. But, you know, you have to rebuild. And ironically, you can look right now at, not that any of you will, but Joplin versus Tuscaloosa, where people were allowed to do whatever they needed to do to start getting back as fast as possible. Joplin, you have a recovery happening. Where they were stopped from doing it, based on when the planning finishes and when we get the FEMA funding and whatever, you have almost nobody able to return home. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Not sure Tuscaloosa wanted people to return home. I don't even know about Joplin. I wouldn't, you know Joplin if it bit me, but, you know, I know what the numbers say. So climate change, we're not winning that issue.
That's true.